So the new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros have been out for 4 or 5 months now, and I think one of the hardest things for people to make their mind up about isn't so much the specs of these machines, but the size of them, which size of machine to go for, the 14 or the 16-inch. Speaking for myself, I've been working with the MacBook Pro 14-inch for about 4 months now as my daily driver for YouTube and voiceover, and I have to say I'm really happy with it so far. But I also do have a confession to make, and that is that I bought this machine by accident. Let me explain. About 5 or 6 months ago, my 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro just died, suffering a complete memory and graphics failure. As I bought it from Amazon and it was still under warranty, they said I could send it back to them to be repaired. Anyway, about a month later, I still hadn't heard any news of my machine, and after several phone calls and a lot of frustration, Amazon finally agreed that they couldn't actually fix it and would be sending me a brand new machine. They also very kindly said that I could keep the old machine to trade in or dispose of as I wished. Eventually, one sunny morning, both machines turned up on my doorstep. Now, you might think this would make me very, very happy as my tech problems seem to be solved, but you would be wrong. That's because I just couldn't get over the feeling that this brand new Intel MacBook would let me down just like the previous version. Well, this first world problem coincided with the fact that they just released the new 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros, and I looked at these machines like the Martians looked at Earth in the War of the Worlds with envious eyes. But did I really need the very latest M1 MacBook Pro? Well, to tell you the truth, not really. The Intel had been doing fine up until the point it broke down, and while that was being repaired, I was getting along absolutely fine with my M1 Mac Mini. But did I want a brand new MacBook Pro? Hell yes! Then I found out I could get a combined trade-in value of £1,500 for my old machines, and my fate was sealed. So I did what I'd advise anybody else to do, and I went down to my local Apple store and played around with these new machines. And I'm glad I did this, because after about 30 minutes my mind was made up. It just wasn't worth the extra £500 for the 16-inch. And even the 14-inch display was so stunning that after a few minutes of using it, I'd forgotten that I'd ever owned a 16-inch. And nearly 5 months on, I don't really have any regrets about my choice. Here's why. Most of the time I'm plugged into an external monitor anyway and don't do much travelling. I spend the majority of my time editing video and voiceover, and realistically I wouldn't spend most of my time editing on a laptop anyway, even if it was a 16-inch, simply for the sake of my eyesight and those hunched shoulder ergonomics. I'm very lucky to travel a whole 90 feet to my home office every day, and the 14-inch takes up a lot less room on my desktop, giving me enough space to plug in all my external devices without too much hassle. And I also like the feeling of security I get from being able to just unplug at the end of the day and bring the machine back into the comparative safety of my house. And also, if any last minute emails come in at the end of the day, I don't have to come all the way down to my studio and plug in again. I can just use this laptop as a laptop. Also, if my wife's watching something on television that I don't want to watch, I can just nip upstairs with my laptop, open it up, and watch the latest episode of The Walking Dead. Yes, I am sticking with The Walking Dead, but I'm just waiting for Rick Grimes to come back to put the series out of its misery. So if you watch my previous review of the 14-inch MacBook Pro, you might realise that I really don't want to go any bigger anytime soon with a laptop ever again. Having said that though, and in the interests of balance, who is the 16-inch for? Well, for a start, there are lots of people out there who live in small spaces and they just don't have the room for a full-time monitor setup. And what about people who are always on the move, like say YouTube travel vloggers or small-scale run-and-gun shooter editors, who really don't want to stare at a tiny laptop screen in a hotel room at the end of a long day's filming? And if you are primarily working from a laptop all the time, it does just make sense, I think, to go for the largest screen. You might also think that a bigger machine means bigger and better cooling, but that's not necessarily the case. Many YouTubers who go into far more and greater technical detail than me have extensively comparison tested these machines, proving that they're being clocked specifically not to overheat and therefore not reaching their full potential anyway. And for the first time, both sizes of machine can be spec'd out to the maximum level. They also have exactly the same port selection. So at the end of the day, depending on specs, you're still paying an extra £500 just for that larger screen size. So think about it really hard. If you don't need the bigger screen, is it really worth going for the bigger machine? I think so many of us are hypnotized by the bigger screen, thinking bigger must be better, and that's exactly why Apple give us these seemingly impossible choices. I think they prefer us to go bigger and therefore spend more money. Now, in the past, I found the longer I used to agonize about buying one piece of equipment or another, eventually a little voice in my head would start saying, oh, just buy the bigger, more expensive thing. It must be better because it's bigger and more expensive, and you won't have to think so hard anymore. Go on, you deserve it. Well, let me tell you that voice will destroy your bank balance. So is bigger better? Is the larger 16-inch MacBook Pro really worth it after all? Well, maybe it is, if only on the ergonomics side. If you have to look at a laptop screen all day and you can't be plugged into a monitor, then obviously, if you have the money, the larger machine really is going to be the one to go for. But if you are plugged into a monitor most of the time, I would highly recommend going for the 14-inch MacBook Pro. I hope this video has gone a little way towards helping you make up your mind whether you're going to buy the 14-inch or the 16-inch MacBook Pro. As for me, I'm perfectly happy with the 14-inch. I think it's the perfect balance between size, ergonomics, price and weight, and I certainly won't be going back to a larger machine anytime soon. But to make me feel a little less guilty about my accidental purchase, I have now sold my M1 Mac Mini and I'm working on the 14-inch MacBook Pro full time. But if you are one of those people who just enjoys spending lots of money, then buy the 16-inch MacBook Pro and have it specced out to the max. Then have it gold plated until the next big shiny thing comes along. That's it for this video. See you in the next one.